Jesse Coy here from Coaching Distance. And today I want to talk about a book that, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already read. I've read it once and gone through it a second time to just pick out things I've liked. I've also listened to probably every podcast that Marius Bakken has been on. A good one that I just listened to was with Steve Magnus, but there's, I think, three or four other ones that recently he's been on talking about the book and the Norwegian Method. And then also, if you haven't visited his website, mariusbakken.com, that's also a really good supplement to this book. Here's what I pulled out of the book. I think it's six different things: interval length and paces, protecting the easy runs, drip load, this concept of drip load. Marius Bakken is also a medical doctor. He talks about ferritin levels and the importance of having the right ferritin levels for your runners. The golden zone, and that's in reference to threshold training. And then double what? So how can we use double threshold or not use it with high school kids? Since this is mostly the people listening will be high school coaches. Interval length, Marius Bakken uses three different types of intervals: short intervals, medium, and long. And the short ones would be like 1 to 3 minutes, medium 4 to 5 minutes, long 8 to 12 minutes, or the examples he gives in his book. So the short ones, and these paces are also an example from the book. So maybe it's 5 to 5:10 per mile. For most of our runners, that's going to be maybe 1Ks to mile repeats, 1200s, 1Ks, miles within there. That seems to me sort of like a bread and butter type threshold workout that maybe you've already done in your training plans or in your past training with your kids. Long intervals, 8 to 12 minutes. I've really liked to use these instead of continuous tempo runs. Recently, I still do have continuous tempo running. I think that's a good skill to have to teach pace, regulation, effort distribution for high school kids. But these longer intervals are something I've tried to use more often in place of that continuous tempo run. So Bakken talks about 8 to 12 minute repetitions. And then these would even be a little bit slower than your short or medium intervals. So his example would be like 5:20 to 5:30 pace per mile. So these would all be this threshold category that Bakken is talking about. But as you notice, the paces are all a little bit different depending on the length of the interval. So a lot of his weeks are kind of static in the book and what he's recommended, but you can also see a variation within these different types of threshold training. So it's not always exactly the same pace, not always exactly the same workout, but sort of this concept of a little bit faster, a little bit slower, and you're also working on the middle. So, over and under to improve this lactate threshold. So interval length was something that I took out of the book that I really liked because I always like variety. High school kids will always like variety. College kids, adults, variety is good in training. But what's cool about this is they all hit the same, physiological goal, this improving lactate threshold. So protecting the easy runs was the next thing I took out of this from Marius Bakken. If the purpose of your run, so you do a workout, say you do a workout on Tuesday, the next day, if the purpose is recovery, you should probably go pretty slow. And another thing Bakken has in his book, and I don't know for sure if it's on his website, I think it is, but is to not clutter these days with other stuff. What comes to my mind right away is adding strides on these days. So say we did a workout Tuesday, we come back Wednesday. Let's just have that day be an aerobic day where we're doing some running. We've also added in some injury prevention work, some rope stretch, things like that. But have that day be really just easy running. He talks about muscle tone. That also, I think, can be affected by adding too much stuff on easy days. So kind of getting back to normal on these easy days, Bakken talks about. And I'll just pull a little paragraph out of here and I'll just read it. Protecting the easy runs, the below 70% rule. And I'm reading out of his book here, Marius Bakken's book. In this context, it's critical to protect the easy runs. Keep them consistently below 70% of max heart rate, regardless of level. So regardless of if you're an elite runner, if you're just starting out. And then he goes on to say, when I trained toward what became my personal best of 13:06 for 5,000 meters, and mind you, this was before super shoes, before bicarb. That's pretty fast. He said my easy pace was around 410 to 420 per kilometer, which is like 641 to 657 per mile, slower than many runners with far weaker personal best. So he gives an example from himself of doing those easy runs. And for a 13:06 5K runner, running around 7-minute pace is pretty easy. You'll probably see high school kids that are 3 minutes slower for 5,000 meters trying to run their easy days faster than this 13:06 Marius Bakken. And just mathematically, that doesn't make sense either. So protecting the easy runs, not worrying about hitting a certain pace is something I really, really loved from the book. The drip load. So drip load the fast stuff. And Bakken talks in his book about these X factor workouts, adding something fast to each week, even during the base phase, like not getting so far away that we haven't done anything at mile pace, 3K pace, and all of a sudden we are in the competition period. So he gives an example of an X factor workout. And I believe in his weeks, it would be Tuesday, Thursday, double threshold, Saturday, this X factor workout, where he gives an example of 30-second hills in the off season, doing a bunch of those to maintain that connection with race speed, some fast twitch type work. But he also says there's other ways to do it. And one of the things I liked was this drip load. Instead of having a full session dedicated to this faster race pace type running, that you can add it to the end of some of these threshold sessions. And if you've seen, excuse me, if you've seen other webinars on coaching distance, you got to watch Dr. Messer. He talks about distributed threshold training. In my mind, drip load is very much the same as that. And I give an example here of, kids always think, oh, we got to do this faster work. Okay. And they think that speed is going to be the answer to getting faster in races. And what you really need is this bigger engine. So if you're doing a couple workouts a week, this threshold type work, adding on a little bit of this faster stuff at the end of that isn't going to sabotage those workouts, but you're going to build your engine and then add that speed or that speed endurance, that race pace type work at the very end of that, so that you've checked that box. And then when the competition period comes to that, you're kind of ready to do that. If you need to do a few faster workouts, you're ready for it. And I think this is a direct quote, but Marius Bakken talks about just pressing that button regularly. So a little bit of fast work, but not like in a huge session when he's talking about the drip load, because he talks about not disrupting what you're trying to build. If you're trying to build this aerobic base, if you're trying to improve your endurance, then adding a really fast workout each week, like maybe you're doing a bunch of 300s, 200s, 400s, like that can sabotage a little bit of what you're trying to build, depending on the type of year. So drip load was something I really liked, resonated with me. I was able to relate that to what Dr. Messer talks about with distributed threshold training. And if you've looked at the training plans this off season, you'll notice a lot of drip, just dripping that faster workout throughout the week and kind of tagged on to the end of workout days. Now, this is different. I just want to make a distinction. It's different than when I would talk about speed work. So that would be super short running, 10 seconds or less, where we do implement that on the day before the workout because the cost is super low, but the benefit is high. And that's not what I'm talking about with the race pace type, longer anaerobic type work. Like I would call that something separate, this true speed type work. So Ferritin. Now, Marius Bakken is also a medical doctor. And this first thing I'm going to read off here comes from his book. Australian Institute of Sports recommends that ferritin should be 30 to 40, doesn't matter. But your ferritin should be 30 to 40. And preferably, I put this in red. If you're listening to it, it's not going to make any sense, but preferably around 50. So the ferritin number and the units, I'm not even sure but the ferritin should be preferably for runners who are training hard, preferably around 50. And Dr. Bakken wrote that a ferritin value of under 30 is clearly problematic for runners. And that's kind of tricky because sometimes if we're as coaches, that's out of our lane. So if you see a kid who you're like, oh my gosh, like they're struggling in practice and in races, like their iron may be low, you have to refer them to a medical professional. And one of the tests that you should also have the parents recommend is this ferritin test. And ferritin kind of matches your ferritin number will match your iron stores. So it gives you a better picture of what the iron situation is with your runner, is having this extra ferritin test that kind of determines what your storage level looks like. Because we know with running is one way to lose red blood cells. And if your storage is low, it doesn't take long for performance to suffer. So that was another thing I pulled out of there. It's sometimes just not something general practitioner would order as this ferritin test, but something to definitely look for with your runners. The golden zone. So this golden zone, Bakken talks about this threshold training zone where you can accumulate a lot of work and the cost is minimal. I think we're all trying to find this zone of training where we can do a lot of work, we get a lot of benefit out of it, and the cost is very little. What Bakken is talking about is training at the zone, and maybe it's 2.0, maybe it's 2.5 millimoles of lactate, but they're testing all the time with lactate strips, like in between repetitions. As high school coaches, we're not going to do that. So we do want to find this zone, though, that's like this just right intensity for each duration of repetition. So if we're doing 1Ks, like we want to find an intensity that works really well for that distance, where kids can do a lot of it. The next day, they're not that tired and they're ready to come back in a couple of days and do a similar type of work. Like that's how we want to try to build adaptation. So when you look at the newer training charts, it's percentage based. And I used Renato Canova's math. It's a little different than when you just divide by percentages into an Excel sheet. And we use 3,200 meter pace as the baseline. And then go on 5% increments off that. So this threshold zone, which we use, the fastest pace out of that would be 90% of 3K or 2 mile pace. And then 85, 80, and then stop at 75, which I call subthreshold in the training charts. So this zone, those paces fit pretty well with different lengths of intervals. Now, part of it is trial and error. So you may notice that maybe 85% when you're looking at your charts is too fast for some of your kids to do mile repeats at. You just go 80%. The recommendations, like when you're looking at the chart, when you're trying to do threshold training, it's very smart to use date pace and not like an all-time best, but estimate where the kids are at right now. The faster part of each session, so there's like a fit portion, which is a threshold portion, and I'm talking about like the coaching distance training plans, that fast part of the workout, then you can run goal pace on that. But for like this threshold work, VO2, CV, tempo, subthreshold, you want to base those paces off of like date pace for a mile or 3,200, and you can cross-reference those on the training charts. Double T. So high school kids, should they be doing double threshold work? That's a question I ask myself a lot. And I think the answer is no. I think there's other low-hanging fruit. For some kids, it's just running every day to get that check that box first. Now, for kids who are experienced, your juniors and seniors, maybe it's a good idea to add double E days, so double easy days. Typically in the US, we think of that double as being a 20 to 30-minute run, so a shorter run. But my question is something I'm going to try out this summer and into next fall is what if we use something more of like what you see in Bakken's examples on these easy days of what if you just double that easy day? So maybe in the morning you do 40 minutes, and then the afternoon you do 40 minutes, or in the morning you do 50 minutes, the afternoon you do 50 minutes. So that concept of fitting in an extra run instead of this common short double that we have seen in US high school systems. So maybe the afternoon, a couple days a week, you just double the duration of your morning run. So in the coaching distance plans, I set aside Monday and Thursday for this, where the morning could be 50 minutes. And then maybe the afternoon, you want to start experimenting with another 50-minute run. And then doing that again on Thursdays for maybe some of your older kids, your seniors who are ready for higher mileage. And the example I have here is Ingebretson. In a lot of his easy days, it's 10K in the morning, 10K in the afternoon. So that too, if you tried that with high school kids, maybe that would help them transition better to a college that does do double threshold training. If you're already used to running twice a day, 2 longer sessions in a day, 2 longer easy runs, then maybe that transition to doing 2 workouts in a day will be a little easier. Okay. But starting with something safer in high school of just 2 easy runs to make that transition. If they run at a college that does double threshold, seems like several of them do now, to make that transition a little bit easier. So those are 6 things that I picked out of Marius Bakken's new book. Obviously, there are hundreds more that you'll probably find when you read through it. Do buy his book. I loved it. It's something I think when you buy it, you're going to keep that thing. You're not going to donate that to the Goodwill. That's staying with you. I find myself almost daily looking back into it just to see things I may have missed, to reread things to make sure my understanding is good on what he's talking about. And I would say, like, I'm not building a training model on that, but the more information you have, I always think is the better. So if you have any questions, contact me, Jesse, Jesse at coachingdistance.com. And you don't have to like or comment on this. Just let me know if you have any questions or you want to talk about training. My email's there.